Welcome to this new automotive news video for Saturday, April 18, 2026. And today we're going to talk about the leading European power, Germany, which is asking the Commission to slow down on going fully electric and to allow even more internal combustion vehicles than what was planned after 2035. We'll also talk about electric car sales, which are dropping sharply at BMW, and they've taken the opportunity to announce the end of one of their electric models. We'll also talk about Stellantis, which is going all out to save its Lancia Ypsilon by offering it even cheaper than a Peugeot 280. I hope the topics I've chosen will interest you as much as they did me. If that's the case, feel free to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for upcoming videos, boosting this one, and leaving a comment where you share your thoughts on this Saturday's news. So before we dive into this video with major topics concerning the German automotive industry, including both the government asking the European Commission to backtrack and BMW's results, I'll slip in a quick news update about the Stellantis Group. As I mentioned in the introduction of this video, the Stellantis Group is trying everything it can and is desperately trying to save the sales of its Lancia Ypsilon, which is selling very poorly. Stellantis has only sold 11,000 units across all of Europe throughout 2025, very far behind the segment leaders, meaning the compacts, like its technical cousin, since it's exactly the same car. Apart from the bodywork, the Peugeot 208, which sold 18 times more during this period, with 185,000 units, and that's 4 times worse than the old Ypsilon, which in 2023 sold 40,000 units, even though it was in its 14th year on the market. A big surprise because this Ypsilon is basically a Peugeot 208 with leather seats with stitching and a polarizing, if not questionable, exterior design. To try to salvage things a bit and boost sales, the Lancia Ypsilon is now going to benefit, if you can call it that, from a new version. A cheaper entry-level version equipped with the sacred PureTech, the 1.2-liter 3-cylinder turbo that has still been modified in recent years, especially with a timing chain replacing the famous belt. In this version, it is paired with a 6-speed manual gearbox, unlike the hybrid A version, which until now was only offered with a dual-clutch automatic transmission. The announced performance isn't impressive. It's a 100-horsepower car. So you won't be surprised to learn that it goes from 0 to 110.2 seconds and has a top speed of 194 km/h. Another interesting thing is that it's subject to the penalty. You'll have to pay about €280 for the CO2 emissions tax. In this version, the Ypsilon simply becomes one of the cheapest in the Stellantis group since it's priced at €21,800. That's €3,000 less than the previous entry-level model, the Hybrid A, which was at €24,000, and especially €3,000 cheaper than a 208 with the same engine, which is also priced at €24,000. We'll see how it turns out, but what's certain is that with this new pricing strategy, Lancia is clearly abandoning its premium ambitions. You can't be both the cheapest brand in the group and claim to be premium, which could be an issue long-term. In this video, I wanted to talk to you about a big topic. Since the German government, well, I know it's not really a government, it's a federation, but it's simpler to just say government, is already asking the European Commission for a new delay regarding the end of combustion engines, which is planned for 2035. So I say already, because in reality, at the end of 2025, the European Commission has already accepted some easing measures. Notably, the fact that manufacturers can continue to sell a small number of combustion engine vehicles between 2035 and 2040, provided that these are mainly plug-in hybrid cars. It's a first step, but for the German government, it's not enough. What happened is that last year, during the debates about ending combustion engines, the main German political parties were quite divided on the issue, especially regarding the solution to be implemented. What has changed now is that for the past few days, the two main German political parties, the CDU and the CSU, have managed to reach a consensus. They have agreed on a series of measures that they will jointly advocate to the European Commission in order to obtain a further easing of the planned phase-out of combustion engine cars. Now, I am going to give you a list of what the German government is asking for regarding this end to combustion engines. For example, it is asking the European Commission to suspend the revision of the utility factor in 2027. So, what is this thing? It's a kind of ratio estimated by the European Commission that's supposed to represent for a range-extended vehicle, or a plug-in hybrid vehicle, the number of kilometers driven in 100% electric mode compared to the number of kilometers driven using the combustion engine. The utility factor is especially used during the vehicle type approval process, particularly during the WLTP protocol, to estimate its consumption and CO2 emissions. It's thanks to a fairly high utility factor that plug-in hybrids, even with very large engines, manage to show very low consumption. In reality, that's not always the case. It really depends on how you use this type of vehicle. For private owners, generally, they play along, they charge their plug-in hybrid every day at home, and drive almost all the time in electric mode. On the other hand, when it comes to companies that have bought in large numbers plug-in hybrid cars, we know that drivers don't always make the effort to charge their cars, And as a result, they consume much more than what's stated on paper. So the Commission has decided that in 2027, it will apply a new utility factor so that in the lab, the measured fuel consumption and CO2 emissions will be closer to reality. Now, that's in a very big air quotes, because those who follow the rules and charge their plug-in hybrids regularly have fuel consumption figures that match what is stated on paper. So, in the end, it mainly penalizes them. The German government doesn't want that because these brands are among those that have invested the most in plug-in hybrids. Porsche, Audi, Mercedes, BMW, they all offer big engines, hybrid engines with large batteries. They also reject the supercredit system for small electric vehicles. You know, those are all the little European-style K cars that Peugeot, Renault, and Citroën want to produce and sell. Tiny electric cars with tiny ranges and minimal safety standards. It actually makes sense that Germany would be against it because, overall, these brands hardly offer any city cars, and they would end up being penalized compared to the French competition in particular. But also the Italian competition. Germany also wants to request the removal of the excess emissions compensation system. Basically, after 2035 for brands that continue to sell combustion engine cars, whether hybrid or not, those sales have to be offset, either by using low-carbon steel, or by having these cars run on synthetic fuels that are CO2 neutral, or by funding renewable energy projects or reforestation. Germany wants the compensation system to end after 2035, allowing manufacturers to sell combustion engine cars without any compensation requirements. Also, since we're talking about synthetic fuel, Germany wants all cars that are designed to run only on synthetic fuels or e-fuels to be treated, like electric or hydrogen cars, as zero-emission vehicles. All right, one last thing before we go. The German government also wants more flexibility in the interim targets before 2035, since, in fact, the difficult goal to achieve right now isn't 2035. There are still 9 years left. What's going to be complicated is 2030 with targets that are particularly difficult to reach. This new request from Germany will be reviewed by the European Commission. A vote should take place in June 2026, at which point we'll know if Germany's influence on the decisions of the European Commission is still as strong as before. We continue with topics related to German cars since BMW has just published its results for the first quarter of 2026. Unsurprisingly, and this is the case for most European car brands. Anyway, it's a year that's not starting off very well, with overall sales down by 3.5% with 565,000 units sold. And the drop is especially noticeable when it comes to electric vehicle sales. And I find that quite interesting because right now, on social media, BMW is communicating a lot, explaining that its BMW iX3, one of the latest electric models in the lineup, is selling like hotcakes, with a 40% increase in orders. So indeed, the iX3 is shaping up to be something of a commercial success. It makes sense, since it's one of the first electric vehicles truly capable of exceeding 750 km of range with really fast charging. It's really part, let's say, of the top tier of European technology when it comes to electric cars. On the other hand, if we zoom out a bit and look at BMW's electric results since the beginning of the year, it's actually a 20% decrease that's been recorded, with 87,000 units. And 20% is a lot. And even if we add the other battery vehicles sold by the group, meaning plug-in hybrids, we're still at 15.6%, with 132,000 units. So it's a much more mixed result than what's clearly being announced on social media. That's due to two things in particular, as usual with German brands for the past 2 years anyway. It's China's fault and the United States' fault. I'm not going to repeat the whole story about that, but indeed, BMW is struggling in China because Chinese brands are doing better for less when it comes to electric vehicles. In the United States, BMW's other key market, Americans have stopped buying electric cars due to the end of subsidies. There's a pretty telling figure on this topic. Electric vehicle sales in the United States are down 63% compared to early 2025, when subsidies were still available. We'll see how the end of the year goes for BMW in terms of electric cars. Maybe the arrival of the i3, which should also offer a very long range and a slightly lower price than the iX3, will help turn things around a bit. BMW also announced it's discontinuing one of its electric models, though the events aren't related. Simply, one of its electric models has reached the end of its life cycle. It's the BMW iX. For now, the discontinuation only concerns the United States because it's simply selling very poorly, mainly because it's quite old. It came out in 2021, so electric cars have made a lot of progress since then. Since iX sales in Europe aren't better, honestly, you rarely see one, it should follow the same path there too. And anyway, since it's more or less replaced by the iX3, which is much better for similar launch prices, there's really no reason for BMW to keep this vehicle in its lineup anymore. Let me remind you that this is the second old-generation electric model that BMW has already discontinued since the beginning of the year, because just a few weeks ago, we learned about the end of production, and right after that, the end of sales for the BMW i4. That's all the news for Saturday, April 18th, 2026. Hope you enjoyed the video. If that's the case, don't hesitate to show it by leaving a like, subscribing for future videos, and of course, by becoming a supporter through the join button. I'll see you tomorrow for the last video of the week. By the way, tomorrow's will be a special episode, so see you tomorrow. Bye.